Hey, Queens. I think we are live now. Let me know if you can see me and if you can hear me. We're just gonna wait a minute for a couple of the ladies to join in, and then we'll get started. So we're gonna be talking about the independent woman wound. The very common situation where you feel like you will owe men anything if you accept um, money from them, or if you feel uncomfortable with the idea of um, being provided for by a man, or if you, for some reason, feel like inadequate if a man were to provide for you. Or, for example, if you ever felt uncomfortable or uneasy when you went to a restaurant and they paid for the meal or anything along those lines. Kind of like you had this huge um, focus or huge inclination to want to be independent. So we'll talk about why it's great to be independent. But the purpose of this live and this talk is to illustrate or talk about it when it's not favorable to you, when it's getting in the way of relationships, or when it's getting in the way of your own peace of mind. When you find yourself living this struggle life where you feel like you're the only one who is there for yourself, kind of like you feel alone, you feel unsupported, and you feel like you're doing it all by yourself. That's when the wound of the independent woman can be problematic, right? As opposed to empowering, as opposed to liberating, you find that your life is not easy, it's not in flow. Your life is just struggle. And you have difficulty with relationships with men, aka all of a sudden you are in your masculine energy, not in a good way. We're going to talk about it when it's in a good way and when it's not a good way, in that it's not benefiting your life. It's just making it more complicated. Okay? So I also mentioned that I would share my story in regards to that, because today you see me here, in YouTube talking about all these things, kind of like, does she know it all or something like that, right? And a lot of us here in YouTube, or, coaches and mentors and people like us that are talking like, kind of like over it, is because in my personal case, I have been there and I know what it's like, and I overcame that. And that's why I feel compelled to talk about it for people that are not um over it, or people that are going through it. And yeah, so I've been there, and I'll share some of my story, right? So it's the independent woman wound. It's like a modern day problem, okay, where you are kind of like all you want in life is to be independent and not have anyone help you, and it's a protection mechanism, right? So let's first talk about it, how it is a good thing. It's a good thing in that being a grown woman means that you are have the ability to take care of yourself, and like literally you're no longer a child, because a child needs people to look after them, right? They can't do it on their own. So a grown woman, she needs to be able to literally take care of herself. Like as a woman, you need that masculine energy. Without that masculine energy, that balance or that part of masculine energy, you're going to be too feminine. Kind of like, like a newborn baby girl. She is 100% feminine energy essence. Okay. But when you're a woman, you need to have masculine energy in you. You need to be able to live on your own, know how to make money. Yes, know how to make money for yourself. Because when you look for someone else to do that for you, you're going to attract a lot of situations that are predatory. You're going to find situations where you start being abused, where you start being treated nasty, where you start being controlled. Okay? So you've heard all those stories of the women who were abused and they couldn't leave a relationship. They couldn't leave it because they didn't have anywhere else to go. They felt like they literally couldn't go anywhere else. Why? Because they were not a grown woman. And I mean, of course, there's nuances and things, right? But if you are someone that doesn't have a plan B, uh, okay, this is going to sound a bit extreme, but like a plan of escape or a backup plan in the event that things go awry, aka you don't know how to protect yourself, you don't have that masculine energy that you need, then you turn into a woman child. Okay? So I talked about this in the trad wife gone wrong. Like I have a video about this. But anyway, we'll kind of explore this a little bit more as we go into the video. So how does trauma, how does wounds, how does all of that start? So it always starts when you're young. When you are a child or teenager or that kind of thing, right? So in my case, so let's take myself and you guys back to when I was a child and a teenager in Mexico. So as some of you know, I am Mexican, like born and raised in Mexico. I live in Canada now, but that's where I grew up until I was 20, something like that. The first time that I lived abroad, I was 16, but really and truly, I lived there most of my life until I was 20. I'm 39 now, just kind of for reference. Okay. So, okay, if I'm out of breath, it's because of this pregnancy thing. It's nothing else crazy. So, anyway, growing up in Mexico, I've mentioned before that it's the mecca of light feminine energy. Women there are really, really feminine energy, just really know how to receive. Everything that you see about feminine energy is there. Okay, why? Because it didn't reach them the feminism waves the way it's hit, in the Northern Hemisphere or, the Anglo countries, in Mexico, you still have that purity, still in regards to feminine energy. But what did it mean when the women were mostly in their light feminine energy? A lot of them, they went from being a child, like literally a child, to being married. And I'm not talking about being married at 13. I'm talking about being married at 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever. Being married really young. Okay? Some of them went to university, some of them didn't. Even the ones that went to university, they didn't have a chance to really learn how to make money, learn how to survive kind of in the world out there. They didn't get a chance to really develop their masculine energy. So they had an extreme spectrum of um, light feminine energy. Okay. So, yes, they were married off to men, good men that are protectors and providers, and they went on to be your stereotypical trad wife. Okay. So that all sounds beautiful. And that's this whole new wave of feminine energy, this whole trend that has emerged in North America and in Europe, to gain back your feminine energy. It's kind of like wanting to go back to that, to what I grew up with. But I'm going to tell you, like my story, I'm going to tell you kind of like the dark side of that, how that can cause a wound and kind of trauma and kind of things, right? So I would see the women, the moms, my mom, my aunts, all their friends, all the women, they were, happy traditional wives, happy. And for the most, they were. But what happens is that when they are extreme light feminine energy, they are literally like children, like women child. So when I was really young, I was kind of like, and this is like a manifesting generator thing. So I hope like some of you guys viewing are familiar with human design so that you're more able to understand what I'm talking about. Um, I was someone born with a lot of desires, lots of ambitions, if you will. Kind of like from a very young age, I was like, I want to live abroad and I want to do this and I want to do that. Like, I was like an endless black hole of desires and things that I wanted to do. And I was like, why am I so different from my mom? Why am I so different from my aunts? Why am I so different from all the women? How come all the women, all they want to do is breed? All they want to do is breed and cater to their husbands. Like their husbands were like gods. Their husbands were like the end be all. They were high up on a pedestal. They were everything to them. And what happens when you put a man or anything or anyone on a pedestal? Not only are they your God, but you give them so much importance that it repels the other thing. It repels the man, it repels whatever thing you're putting on a pedestal. So I was like, why can't I be like them? Just simple. Like they were doing and fulfilling their natural purpose, their biological purpose of reproducing and tending for their children and husbands. And that was it. Okay. And I was like, why can't I be like that? Like I felt like a freaking alien or like a freak for not wanting only that or just or that. At the time, I was like, ew, like that's all you can think about, your children. And like, why are you like, how come you have no desires? And like I mentioned in the Trad Wife Gone Wrong video, nature is beautiful, but it's also cruel as hell. So a lot of these women, being them women child or this kind of thing where they idolize their husbands, the men, they got bored. They got bored of them. And they seeked, they needed to hunt. So they would hunt for a mistress. A lot of them had double lives and, like a mistress forever, for like decades, that kind of thing. So your happy trad wife was sitting there, you know, being happy on the surface, but really and truly, she was kind of miserable because she knew that, you know, the husband had a mistress or a double life. So not only that, but it just kind of brought a lot of dissatisfaction to them, right? Like, yeah, they were satisfied with being, uh, you know, like wives, and their children were everything. But anyway, to me, that was kind of like traumatic. I was like, why? Like, I am so freaking different. And a lot of times I was being like, not shamed, but like, I was being told, like, oh, you want all these things. Like, you should understand that in life, all that matters is your family and that kind of thing, right? So naturally, I was like, I don't want this crap for my life. Like, I need something else. And then, and everything I thought about from a very young age, everything I wanted, everything I could think about was being independent. Like, I wanted to live alone. I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want anything to do with any of that. So when I was 16, I went as an exchange student to Sweden for a year with an organization called AFS. So I lived with a family, a Swedish family. I went to high school there for a year, and I got to know a different way of life. And I absolutely loved the women there. They were they were women. They weren't children. They had careers they liked. They had a say. Okay? Kind of like families were more like a democracy rather than a dictatorship like it felt in Mexico. So, of course, at first, I was fascinated. At first. But then after a year, of course, I understood that it was the other extreme. Okay? Kind of like they ended up in marriages that were more of a partnership, more of a roommate situation, more of a roommate, literally. So those relationships were relationships without polarity. And I thought, there has to be something better. And what I want to come to say here is you can literally do and create a life exactly as you want. You don't have to follow obviously, right? Like a tradition here or there. So I'll tell you how that trauma or obsession about wanting to be independent, how it came to be healed. Now, in my case, it didn't go too far in my life. It like I was maybe in my early 20s when I healed this, and when I got over this whole thing. And the good news in my case was that I never let it um seep or leak into, other areas of my life. It was just like an internal thing. And I'll talk about what real feminine energy is in a minute, right? So, the first step in that healing of like, because the wound itself translated into absolutely hating the thought and the idea of being a wife. Like, I cringed at the idea of that because I thought that being a wife meant being uh like a woman child. And this woman child in Mexico, like aunts, neighbors, even my own mother. Like my own mother, she was a psychologist, but she was a stay-at-home mom. But she didn't want anything else in life other than her kids and her friends and her husband, right? So to me, being married, it meant that I to me I was like, that's stupid. Like, they're just stupid. That's how I saw it. Just for you to realize the wound that it is, or that it was at the time. So that was what the wound translated as, right? Me being like, I don't want that. Kind of like there was a moment where, maybe when I was like 17 or so, I thought, or 16, I thought I never want to be a wife because being a wife means being stupid. Okay. So the first step in the healing was awareness of the pattern, awareness of what was going on. And then having the opportunity to live somewhere else and see that it didn't have to be like how I grew up. Basically, if you had a situation where you saw your parents being a certain way, your mom being a certain way, the society where you grew up was a certain way, the good news is that that doesn't have to be you. So when I realized, you know what? That's just in Mexico. I don't have to be like that. But I also don't have to be like the Swedish woman. How about I am a mixture of the two? How about I am the best of both worlds? The traditional world and the modern world, whatever you want to call it. So that's, how, like, the first step in healing, just realizing that it didn't have to be me like that. And then I just decided, I said, you know what? No, when I get married, I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to be either one extreme, like neither like the Swedish women or like the Mexican women. How about I'm a hybrid of all of the above? Okay. So I decided, I said, I don't have to be like them, because the whole thing with the independent, wanting to be independent, how it would have been problematic for me, or and how it's problematic for a lot of people, is when like you're like, no, I'm so independent that I don't want any men to pay anything for me because then I owe them. And please let me know in the comments if you relate to that, if you have ever felt that, or if you've ever seen anyone say this, that kind of thing. So anyway, what I was saying was that I decided I didn't want to have to be any of that, and that it's problematic if I had let that influence negatively my relationships with men. Like, for example, a lot of the clients that I see today are like trying to get over the issue of course, they want to step into their feminine energy. And what they have to overcome is not allowing men to give them. So they are learning to receive, not only from men, but from life in general. And that's kind of also what I wanted to talk to you about. So, feminine energy is not this superficial thing, it's not this performance thing. So, like I was saying, in my case, by the time that I was maybe like 22 or 23, I had already done that inner work and introspection, knowing that I didn't have to be like the stereotypical women back in Mexico or the extreme of the Swedish women who were too masculine. I decided and knew that I could be whatever I wanted. It was a decision that was made. So I never let this seep into or leak into, like, when I was dating for marriage. None of that. I had already done all of that inner work. So you don't have to let that seep into your relationships, right? But so I didn't have that wound on the superficial level. But guess what? For some time, it remained as a background frequency. What does that mean? So even though, like, I never like projected all this stuff onto men, or my husband, whenever I did get married like at 27, there was a part of me in the very background of on the subconscious, on the back of my mind, that still had some of that um some of that sort of worry, some of that trauma, right? Where I wasn't in a receptive mode just from life. I was more in a hustle mode, right? Just as a background frequency. So, really and truly, when I was able to let go of this whole independent obsession, was when I was able to step back and choose a life that where I allowed myself to receive from life, to receive from my own husband, and just from any source, right? So if you ever found yourself stressing, worrying that you have to do it all, if you find yourself feeling alone, that's when the wound is still there, and where you need to step back and just trust that you're not on your own. Trust that you can receive from many sources, not just from your own self. You don't have to just provide for yourself, be it safety, be it material things, none of that. So it was not also like the whole independent woman wound. It was also a motherhood wound. So I don't know if like we have time today to talk about that, because like each of these things can be like a can of worms, like a whole story. But this whole thing of growing up surrounded by women who wanted nothing but to breed and to worship their husbands was kind of traumatic enough to see them as, like kind of like, oh, like a stereotype, right? So obviously for a long time I was scared of the being a mother, because I thought, well, look at that, I don't want to be like that. So it took awareness, awareness that look at how I'm thinking, and I don't have to be like that. That doesn't have to be me. I get to choose, I get to decide to be whatever it is I want to be. So, I mean, of course, that's a longer topic, but that's kind of the gist of it. Where if you find yourself feeling like you will owe men anything, if you find yourself that you don't believe maybe in marriage because you don't want it to be, because you're scared of losing your independence or anything like that, it's when you have to be aware that there is a wound that you're currently uh, not fully okay, and that it doesn't have to be like that, right? So, so yeah, I mean, it's I get this inquiry all the time in coaching, or if you go see in the comments in a lot of the stuff that I post, you'll see women that are like, not comfortable with men providing for them. Like, it's women that are still in their masculine energy in an extreme, right? Because the whole point of this talk today, this slide, is to say you need both feminine energy and masculine energy. So by the time that I decided to get married and that I, pulled the trigger on that, I had worked so much not only on my inner work, my introspection in regards to these wounds, but I had also developed my own masculine energy, right? Like I got married as a grown woman. I had lived in 4 different countries by the age I was 26. I had a career, I had a lot of accomplishments behind my back, right? And that sense of accomplishment gives you a lot of, I'm going to say this because a lot of people don't agree with this, but it does give you a lot of confidence when you're able to know that you're okay by yourself, that you can, that you're a grown woman, literally makes you confident. Because, for example, a lot of the inquiries that I get for coaching is women that are not very confident, but it's because they have not developed their masculine energy. Kind of like they don't know how to take care of themselves. They don't have the ability to take care of themselves. Kind of like they don't know how to make money. They're afraid to do this, they're afraid to do that. And not to judge in any way, shape, or form, but the diagnosis of that is that you simply need to develop your masculine energy. So, also part of what I want to say here is before getting married, make sure you feel like you're a grown woman. Make sure you feel like, you know, that whole trend of like, be your own dream woman so that you can be someone else's dream woman, or like, love yourself first so that others can love you. Be your own dream girl so others can see you as a dream. That's literally it. Kind of like develop your masculine energy enough to where you are proud of yourself, you are confident in your abilities to be, not just survive, right? To be and thrive on your own. Okay? Because I've talked about this in many videos where I've mentioned, if you are waiting to be rescued by a man, be freaking careful. Be really careful, because when you're in that survival mode and you just want to be rescued, what happens is that you bump into a lot of predatory men. You end up in relationships where you're being abused, where you're being treated like crap. So that's what I saw in Mexico growing up. These women that were too much in their feminine energy, in their light feminine energy, they were not treated great. They were like, the men weren't loyal to them. They didn't adore them, right? Because they were like children. You know what I mean? So yeah, they took care of them, kind of like, like you take care of a child and things, but that was about it. So when you don't have that masculine energy developed to balanced, right? You're not going to be able to tap into your dark feminine energy. What does that mean? Whenever, and any man out there, even the kindest man out there, you need to have boundaries. You need to put limits. With the kindest man out there, the sweetest guy, you still have to be kind of like a bitch, for a lack of a better word, sometimes. But guess what? If you are afraid, if you come from a place of being scared, right? You're like, if I rock the boat, he's going to leave. If I rock the boat, he's going to be mad at me. So you end up becoming the nice girl syndrome. You end up becoming the girl that allows people to abuse them, step all over them. So, like the women in Mexico, they were cheated on, and they never left the men because because they didn't know where to go. They had nowhere to go. They had no plan B. They had no savings of their own. They had nothing. Yeah? So if you come from a place of fear when you're negotiating with a man, when you're dealing with a man in any capacity, when you have that fear, you're not able to tap into your dark feminine energy. Yeah? So when you're not able to tap into your dark feminine energy, then you're not going to be respected. And like I say in a lot of my videos, really the heart of a man's love to you resides on his respect to you. Because for a man to feel loved, they need to be respected, but them respecting you back is it's part of how they really fall for you, and like for real, right? When they respect you. They can only respect you when you respect yourself. And you're not respecting yourself if you say, I don't like this. This doesn't work for me. When you can't be genuine because you have fear of being left, you have fear of being alone, you have fear because you have nowhere to go, or you don't want to go back to doing the job that you hated, right? So you're negotiating from a place of, this is all I have. So that's that. It's so, in recap, it's, I was able to heal that wound of wanting to be independent to the point where I didn't want anything to do with I shouldn't say I didn't want anything to do with marriage or anything like that. I think very quickly I I realized that I didn't have to be like them. And I would even if it sounds arrogant, I would say, you know what? No, no, no. I can be better than they were. Like, I don't have to do what they were doing. So for you, it's the same exact story. If you grew up with a pattern, oh, thank you for the hearts. If you grew up with a pattern of something you didn't like in your childhood or growing up, or if the relationships around you are like icky and you don't want anything to do with that, the good news is that you don't have to be like them. And all it takes is a decision, just saying, you know what? That's not me. Or for example, like I get a lot of clients that say, I'm afraid that all men cheat. That's just them. That's just them. It doesn't have to be you and you're watching you from Nepal. Wow, that is amazing. Thank you for being here. Kavya. Kavya? Yeah. So, yeah, it doesn't, whatever it is that you saw growing up or you still see it, like marriages that are gross in your view, just anything that you see that you're like, well, I don't want to be married because look at that. Or I think that all men cheat. Any of these beliefs that get formed in your childhood or when you're young or from your environment, okay, it doesn't have to be like that. So before I had proof that there were other ways to live, like even before I went to Sweden to live, I knew, I knew inside of me, I just knew that it didn't have to be like that. I didn't care if I had to be the first one to do it differently. So you, like, don't be afraid. Like, if currently you don't have anyone around you that is a role model or that emulates the type of relationship that you want to have, um, it's okay. Like, you don't have to see a role model. You don't have to see other people doing it great because you get to create whatever it is you want. You get to create the relationship that you want. You get to you don't have to be a stereotype. You get to be literally what you choose. It was good for me to get confirmation when I went to Sweden and I saw that things didn't have to be the way that I grew up, right? And for example, when I was in the journey of entrepreneurship and all that stuff, I mean, I'm still am obviously, right? But before I had role models to follow or to emulate or just to know that it was possible to have whatever I wanted, there was something inside of me that told me if you desire it, you get to have it. You can have it. Because why not? Because you can be the first one, right? So, anyway, not sure if you guys have encountered anything similar. Um, I mean, it's so common today, right? In the Northern Hemisphere and in the Anglo world, to have any of these kinds of wounds, of like being afraid of men paying for you because you think you owe them or because you think that they want to have sex in exchange. No, 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 no. Just receive that. And you're not going to give anything that you don't want to give. So I don't think there's a whole lot to say. If you guys have any questions, any comments, let me know. But if you don't, I will catch you on the next live. I will catch you on the next topic if there's no one who has any questions. I think I've mentioned quite a bit of the examples that some clients, have come up with, or like, I was mentioning all the stuff that I see in the comments. women saying like, oh, I don't feel comfortable with men paying because then I owe them or they want something from me. But that's just kind of like a wound, right? And you being non-receptive because you don't have to give anything that you don't want to give. You know what I mean? So anyway, ladies, thank you for coming to the live. And I'll be seeing you on the next. Alrighty? Bye.